Hey there. Let's spend a few minutes talking about our mock workshop. Now, for all of our workshop activities, they are going to be done through our discussion forum setup. And so they're going to work essentially the same way. You'll have an initial post, and then you'll reply to one or two, depending on the assignment, of your peers. So in this activity, our initial post will actually be the mock workshopping activity, and then we will reply to our peers about the process and whatnot. So, what are we doing with the mock workshop? What is the purpose of workshopping? I guess we do have a video on how to effectively workshop. So, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I want to remind you that when we're workshopping, what we're essentially doing is reviewing our peers' paper or story, and we're looking at the effectiveness. It's not so much a, yeah, I like this story, or no, I don't like this story. It is more, is the peer being effective in applying the techniques that we are learning in class to their story? So we want to be supportive. We don't want to do personal attacks or anything like that. If you choose a story that isn't your favorite genre, um, that's not necessarily the author's fault. So let's not, nitpick. I don't really like romance stories and that kind of stuff. We're looking at the technique that the author, our peer, is using and whether or not they're being effective. And what we want to do is be supportive and be like, yeah, you're doing great, but then be specific on what they are doing great on. So if you're saying like, this is super awesome, have a because in there. This is super awesome because your dialogue is really, really strong. And I feel like I'm right there listening to two people. But we also want to provide actionable suggestions for constructive improvement. So maybe their dialogue isn't super strong. Talk about how they can make it stronger, why they should make it stronger, and how they can make it stronger. Provide actionable suggestions for improvement. So for our mock workshop, what we're doing is actually practicing with the short story Brazen. I made that comment about not liking romance novels, which for the record is totally not true. Romance novels are my absolute favorite. I know they're trashy and I love them anyways. But this story is a little bit of a romantic story. And now, if that's not your thing, that's totally okay. But we're not judging the genre. We are assessing the effectiveness of the author. Okay. So we're going to read that story and then think about it a little bit and then do a mock workshop activity. Specifically, what you want to do is you go into the discussion board and reply to the prompt and have a post where you're effectively workshopping that story. Specifically, we want to write down your observations on the story Brazen. As you read the story, it kind of helps. And then ask yourself a couple questions. What does the author do particularly well? Highlight effective passages. And that's key. We can't just say, yay, their dialogue was great. You need to give specific examples of where it was great and talk about why it was great. And I'm focusing on dialogue, but it's any technique. Maybe the description is wonderful. Maybe the pacing is not super smooth. So look at all aspects of this story and sort of assess on what is being done well and what can be improved. We want to ask ourselves what areas of the text could use maybe more revision and offer actionable suggestions on how they can strengthen their story. So, think about what isn't being super great or super effective, and then provide actionable suggestions on how to improve it. And then finally, we also want to consider if we have any unanswered questions. Okay, so when we're reading the story, are all of our questions answered? Are we satisfied with how the story ended? Do we have all the answers we need? If not, what questions do you have about this story? And this is a good approach not only for our mock workshop, but also for when we're workshopping our peers. What questions do you have about the story? What feels incomplete to you or unanswered? And we'll look at our critical elements to make sure that we are hitting all of them. Specifically, do you include effective passages? Do you highlight particularly effective passages in the story? Do you talk about why those passages were particularly effective? Do you have actionable revisions or suggestions? Do you comment on what could be improved? And do you provide suggestions on how it can be improved? The next critical element that we're looking for is your unanswered questions. Do you have a list of one or two or 8 or 9 or however many you have? Unanswered questions. What did you need fulfilled that wasn't fulfilled in this story? The next thing that we're looking at is engagement. Are you engaging with your peers? So you have your initial post, and then are you replying to your peers? Are you asking them questions and purposefully deepening the conversation that we're having. And then finally, as with all of our assignments, we're going to take a look at our grammar and our mechanics. How is our writing? Are we hitting, effective communicating? Are your sentences, complete and all that good stuff? So once again, essentially what we are doing is we're reading for this activity the story Brazen, and then we're going to workshop it. We're essentially peer reviewing this author's work, what went well, what isn't super great with the story, and we're providing actionable suggestions, and then offering a list of questions that we don't have answered at the end of this story. If you have any questions about the assignment, the story, or anything like that, don't be afraid to let me know. Communication is the biggest key to success in this or any class that you have. So if you have any questions at all, hit me up. We can chat, text, you can give me a phone call, we can do a Zoom meeting, or we can talk in the discussion forums. Whatever way you feel comfortable, let's chat. And remember, workshopping activities can be intimidating, but you definitely got this.